Yes, hello, Zoom people. It's good to see you. Literally see you. Can we do?
Oh, there we go. Look at that.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that.
To see.
Little tiny.
I don't want to see.
Look at that.
Spider on just for a moment. You look good. Look at all those lovies. Oh, that's us. Oh, that's us.
Oh, you know, a lot of young people have told me that one of the most amusing things they do in this world is do Zoom calls with old people. Because the old folks are like, is it working? So welcome to the newly envisioned or re-envisioned questions and response time. And it's good to see everybody. God, I've missed a lot of you guys. Anyway. So why don't we begin with one from the bell? There was one that here's a straightforward one. Well, yeah, let's do the straightforward one. What is the reason we bow, and why is that important? Can everybody hear me on in Zoom land? Okay. Okay. She said Zoom land is fine. It's us here in the hall. So the question is, why do we bow, and why is it important?
I'm happy to answer that because I do. Oh, I do.
That's a lovely question. I love the way it's phrased, that it's not, bowing is so stupid. You know, it's a real curiosity. Why? And assuming, you know, this, they know it's important. So that's really lovely, because it is important, I think. And it fits so well with everything we've been saying all along on retreat, is that bowing is the essential embodiment of our heart. It is the way that we connect to what we're feeling. Then the analogy I sometimes use is, it's like the difference between knowing the lyrics of a song and reading the lyrics of a song and singing the song. Or the difference between, you know, having somebody that you care about and saying, you know, I love you, I care about you to them, and hugging them. It feels different. It is different. It's a whole nother avenue of getting into what's in our hearts and minds. So it doesn't replace the other, but it adds something that is not accessible except through the body. And chanting works the same way. Chanting is the same principle, is that, you know, when we chant, there's the vibrations and the sense. And that's why I like chanting in Pali, because I don't get stuck on any words, because most, you know, I know what they mean in general, but I don't know the individual words. It's just the sound that I appreciate and connects to the heart. And so to me, that's what the bowing is about. It's a way to just physically embody my gratitude, my appreciation, my love, my sense of wonder and awe that these teachings are available to me after 2,700 years. And that remind myself that that is what I feel, and that is so important to me.
It's also a question to me, it's a visual sign of respect. In this context, respect for each other as a person and respect for our practice. Do you want to add something, Steve?
Yeah, yes to both. There's a lot contained in this gesture, and it is traditional and very ancient, and it's also Asian and it's a sign of respect. Just from this microphone, just from a body energy perspective, when you take the right hand and you take the left hand, you put them together. So you're bringing a sense of balance, and a sense of completion, right? And it's at the level of the heart. And so if we look at the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, Buddha doesn't just mean a historical figure. The Buddha is indwelling. And so the Buddha in this being is acknowledging the Buddha in that being. So the Buddha recognizes Buddha, the indwelling wisdom mind recognizes itself in the reflection.
So we do have a number of questions that were put into the bell, but those of you on Zoom can also ask questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can by holding up your Zoom hand, which is under reactions. And we'll get to you just in the normal order of things. There's one question that I don't mean to brag or anything, but I'm an expert at this one. How do I work skillfully with catastrophizing? Maureen knows. Maureen, for you on Zoom, Maureen is just laughing her head off. I think she knows. I do have to say I've been I catastrophize a lot. Often the question goes on when I'm on retreat, especially longer retreats, my mind makes up tragedies happening back home. These thoughts are sometimes difficult to let go of, noticing my attachment to my cell phone, which I suppose for some is a catastrophe in and of itself. Here's what I've learned. I'm bragging, what can I say? I'm a world-class catastrophizer. And I know exactly where it comes from. It comes from causes and conditions that we all have, and they all, okay. It comes from causes and conditions that we all have that arise, you know, both in general in the world, our universal suffering, but also certainly in my case, I've identified it as happening because of, you know, where I come from. I was raised in a family that not only was afraid of losing everything and everybody that was important, but actually did through the murder of the Holocaust. So when I start catastrophizing and I realize I'm doing it, I can take a breath, back off, as always, for all things, check into how is this in my body? And just basically, I have a little mantra that I do oftentimes, which is, that's not happening now. That's not happening now. And a boatload of compassion. Well, of course I would be this way. I inherited it from the source. My father got out just in the nick of time. So here I am. And we all have causes and conditions. I don't want to dwell on my in particular, but we're all quite naturally afraid of losing what we love, even though, as the Buddha taught us in the fourth of the 5 remembrances, that's is going to happen, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen when a rogue spaceship falls on our house, killing everybody there, including my dog. And it's, and that's how the mind goes. It's just how the mind goes. So as with any activity of the mind, as with all activities of the mind, we can just become aware that it's happening. We can disengage by thinking of something such as I do. This isn't happening now. This is my fears talking. And breathe into it and breathe into the body. Oh, this is how that fear feels. Remember, this is an embodied practice, not an intellectual one. This is how that feels. And that's how I deal with it. I mean, and often when I am able to stop and see what I was catastrophizing about, I'll just start giggling, because as often as not, it's so silly. But it's real. It's real until I can get that separation and realize that it's just a working of my mind. It's just an activity of my mind based on causes and conditions and conditioning. And it's not what's happening now.
All of that, for sure. And also, just as David said, so many times they're just ridiculous, the things we, right? And we recognize how bizarre and extreme this catastrophizing is, but it keeps happening. So I think what's interesting to also consider is, why is it keeping to happen? And to try to untangle what might be generating it, which may be some sense of, I'm responsible. And why we, I guess what I also want to say is why we like it, why we keep doing it. And in my experience, the reason we keep doing something is because we somehow believe it, we should be. We either should be or we want to be. And so getting a sense of, oh, actually, I'm thinking, I'm feeling that if that thing happens, I have to be there and fix it. I have to be the one to make sure that doesn't ever happen, or whatever that is. And to notice that we're committed to that belief. And that it's our commitment to those beliefs below the catastrophizing that keeps it coming up and up and up, because we still believe it, even though it's so unpleasant and we don't like it and we think we want it to go away. That it's useful to investigate, is there something that we are continuing to believe, or to feed is the word I like. And that's why it keeps coming up, because we haven't let go of that actual belief that I am responsible. And so then we're constantly protecting the world. And so these catastrophes come up because we've got to be there to protect the world.
It's our responsibility.
And we believe that. I mean, and so that's, we like that. I mean, like is a funny word, but we continue to do it because we still believe we should be, or we want to be. So, you know, this can be a touchy area, but in some ways it's, you know, for anything that we continue to do habitually, even when we know it's bad or it doesn't help us, we've got to get to the part that keeps us doing it, the part that we must be liking and continuing. Why do we keep doing it? And that's hard to disentangle, but until we get to that, we'll keep doing it because there's something that we are doing it, right? It's our mind that's doing it.
Remember, Zoomers, you can ask questions in the chat and, well, you could ask the question in the chat or you could just raise your digital hand and ask it live. Okay, this is, I saw this, this came in yesterday and it's an interesting question. Please briefly describe the major milestones or steps toward being enlightened according to the tradition we practice here now. I guess the cynical part of me wants to say, don't worry about it, which I think is actually true. I think I myself don't want to get into that, specifically beyond saying that there are certain things I think we've all noticed as our practice proceeds, those of us who've been practicing for a while. Less reactive is a big one. You know, and by reactive, I mean, in this context, reaction is the opposite of response. Response is thoughtful, mindful. Typically, reaction is automatic, arising out of our habits of mind, or what Thich Nhat Hanh calls habit energy. That was the first thing I noticed when I started meditating a long time ago, is that I just wasn't reacting automatically. Is this a milestone on the way to enlightenment? I suppose, I don't know. But I think we've all noticed changes if we practice diligently with right effort and honorable intention. And being less reactive is one of them. Pass it on to others who might have more things, but I guess I would conclude my part by saying milestones to enlightenment. Let's not worry about getting enlightened. Let's worry, not even worry, but let's practice right diligence, right effort, and so on. And then we'll notice differences. Stephen?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. However, it's a question that's been asked many times for a very long time. If you want to know the sort of the traditional answers, just Google something like the 10 Bodhisattva stages, you know, which are part of the Mahayana tradition, and you can see what the ancients considered to be stages of awakening, if that's useful. I'll say two more things. You know, we all drive cars, and for many years, I got in the car and drove like it was a contest. You know, can I get through that light before it turns red? You know, how far can I push the speed, you know, without getting caught in the radar? It was kind of a competition between me and everyone else to get where I was going as efficiently as I could get there. That was just driving. That's just what I assumed it was. And years later, I realized that this was really dangerous and that people really got hurt sometimes or killed. And my attitude toward driving changed to, well, how can we do this safely? And recently, my friend, Tony, without saying a word to me, but by riding with him, taught me that you can drive with kindness. What a concept.
You'll need to explain more of that to me later on.
The light turns, Joy Jordan teaches us, the light turns red. Ah, a chance to take a few breaths. Those are stages of enlightenment, I think. What do you think? The other one, the other last thing I want to say about it is, let's not get too fixated on the individual separate self. How does our species awaken? What actions can we do to move this world in the direction of wisdom and love? How do we evolve together? Rather than, how do I get out of this crazy merry-go-round of samsara and get onto a better place? How do we evolve?
And again, real quickly, the assumption that we're need to head toward enlightenment is in and of itself a form of grasping, and that can only cause us to suffer. It's a form of acquisitiveness, of lust, and that can only cause us to suffer. So we just figure out what our practice is and we do it. We'll notice changes, and I think that's got to be good enough for most of us.
Yeah, all of that. And it's not a place we're going to. You know, there's nowhere to get, nowhere to go to. It's right here. And what we're doing is removing the obstacles to it. But it's always here. I think of it like a block of wood that we're sanding to get smooth. We have to just keep sanding it. The smoothness is in the block of wood. It's not somewhere else. It's right there. So we have to, so the only way to get there is to stay here. And I had seen this question earlier, and then I walked by one of Maureen's wonderful quotes. So this is an Ajahn Sumedho quote. One begins to realize that liberation is through letting go, through allowing life to flow, through openness and attention. So it's right here.
Okay. I'm sure we can answer this one in 30 seconds or less. Can you please say a few words about the cultivation of insight and how that process occurs?
So in the Pali Canon, the Buddha talked about what's called samatha vipassana. And they're always together. Samatha vipassana. Samatha is tranquility, serenity, vipassana, insight. Some traditions have separated them and teach, and that's why you sometimes hear people talk about vipassana tradition. But in the early Buddhist practices, they were always together. And Ajahn Chah always used an image of they're like a stick. You pick up one end of the stick, the other end comes too. And that samatha vipassana are that way. They work together, that we initially practice the serenity practice, tranquility. That's what the breath does. The breath gives us serenity. It eases the body, eases the mind settles. And when the mind is settled and clear, insights arise. We see things, we see clearly, so we know. And that insight isn't a thinking thing. It's the words Ajahn Sumedho again uses is it's intuitive knowing, it's intuitive understanding. And it's that intuitive heart getting things that is, in my mind anyway, what insight is. So we can't make insights arise. They arise from, when people talk about getting it, that's what insight is. It's a gut intuitive understanding of the nature of life, of the nature that things that we often think are going to bring us happiness are unable to, are ultimately unsatisfactory, that things don't last, things are constantly changing, that change is what the world is made up of. That's what there is only is change. And that what we cling to as some essential meanness isn't really findable. We can't find it when we look for it. So those aren't, that's the problem, is those aren't things that we read books and then, okay, now I understand it. Those are deep insights that arise through clearly seeing, and clearly seeing arises through settling the heart and mind through our meditation practice.
To echo Jan a little bit, and you might think that I'm creating a dualism here, and I don't mean to do that, but insight, that deep knowing, that clear vision arises out of, well, I'm not going to say shamatha, I'm going to say it arises out of concentration. Concentration in the sense that it's the opposite of dispersion. And we get concentrated by practicing shamatha, that's where it starts. And then depending on what school of practice you are in, it either then the insights can arise on their own, or because being concentrated clears away a lot of the impediments in our mind and on our body. Or we can also train ourselves over time to cultivate some insight without grasping, without trying to figure things out, without trying to get an answer. So, and there's different approaches to this in the various traditions of Buddhism. But I agree with Jan entirely, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to say, oh, I agree with the wise ones. But they do go together. There's no insight without concentration, without practicing shamatha. I was just saying in one of the, in the last group that was once on a jhanas retreat, which is kind of a very focused type of concentration. And I thought, well, isn't this fun? I'm doing something really cool. And was reminded by the teacher that this isn't for, getting all concentrated, it isn't for giggles and because it feels good. Getting concentrated, getting all in one place, having the mind and body at the same place at the same time opens the doorway to insight. So I don't know, I could go on and on, but thankfully, I think you'll think I won't. I don't know if you have anything to add, Stephen.
Our time running out, but I would just say that there's the thinking mind, the yammering, busy, running, thinking mind. And some of the Zen poets, compare the mind to a clear, still lake. And then when it's agitated, there's ripples. And when the agitation calms down, when the lake calms down, becomes clear and still, then you see the reflection of the moon. And that's the metaphor for insight that's useful for me.
Okay, one more. Anybody? Oh, there were other little papers in the bell, so we're done unless somebody has anybody on Zoom have a question? No, we don't. Who is it? Sienna?
Just unmute yourself, please. And ask a question.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. So this is Gina from the Fox Valley. So I was reading and listening to some advice from Hugh Burns, who's an insight teacher, I believe, about habits. And I have some habits that I wish I didn't have. And so, he's a psychologist. And so he was saying, well, really to work on your habits, you have to look into all of the things that contribute, to why do you do this and so on and so forth. And I thought, well, okay, there's my problem. I don't really want to do that, So, but I took it to heart. And then our Sangha was listening to a talk by Ajahn Sona about samadhi a week or so ago. And he was saying that the psychology and all this analysis and everything is not the Buddhist way. He was very, very definitive about that this is just, it's very popular and people tell their stories and maybe understand their stories a little bit, but it doesn't really get them down the road. And that we're much better to work with our Buddhist tools that we have, like if a strong emotion comes up, to recognize it as a hindrance and to deal with that. So these were both very challenging approaches, I thought. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts about either of them.
I always have something to say, but I feel like I'm talking too much. Well, first I'd say is that even very wise monks are still just personalities, and they have strong views sometimes. And that likely they both have, there's some benefit to what each of them are saying. I think what I think I heard you saying, Gina, that the psychologist was saying, was kind of what I was trying to address about the catastrophizing, is that, and I think of it in terms of, addiction is too strong a word and triggering, but just things that strong habits that you have that you keep doing. And that so for myself, speaking for myself, until I'm really willing to recognize that it really is not what I want to do, that it's really harmful to me, I don't give it up, because I still want it. I still like it. And I think that what the psychologist was suggesting is we need to do that investigation to figure out what is that, the payoff or the hook that still has us going. So here's a very mundane, not at all, easy example, but onions and me don't agree. And I've known that for a lot of years, but I thought it was just that they leave a very strong taste in my mouth for a long time. And so I didn't like them. But I like food and lots of food has onions. So I kept eating it all the time. And then on this recent retreat, I was on a month-long retreat just last month. And when people are cooking vegetarian food, they put a lot of onions in the food. And I didn't realize that. And I was getting, this is a little intimate, but I was getting enormous amounts of gas. It was very uncomfortable and very unpleasant because I would smell things, smell up places. And it was just awful. I could not figure out what it was doing. And finally, after like 2.5 weeks, a long time, I started looking at the ingredients lists and realizing that onions was like the second ingredient or the first ingredient. And, you know, there was just onions everywhere and lots of them, you know, because I've eaten onions before and it hasn't been that bad. So now, you know, so that was the trigger to help me realize, oh, I really can't eat onions. It's not just that I like them or don't like them, but I like the food. And the food is no longer interesting to me if it has onions in it. But I had to be willing to give that up. So, you know, that's a very mundane example, but I think that that's sort of how it happens is you have to recognize this really, truly is not for my benefit. And in my understanding, that's how substance abuse ends too, is that people really have to get that they, yes, they enjoy the, whatever the kick of it is or whatever it blocks out, but that they recognize it really, really is not for their well-being. And until they get there, and until I got there, they don't disappear. So I think that's what the psychologist was trying to say, Gina. I think what maybe the Ajahn Sona was trying to say was just that endless talking and thinking about stuff doesn't get you anywhere.
But it can be a strategy of aversion. To invoke Sherry Maples one more time, it's what she used to call, now I'm spacing it, a winning strategy. But winning wasn't that it was a good one, like we won the lottery. It was winning in the sense of it works to keep us away, to help our aversion to things we don't like. And we all have them. I mentioned this yesterday, last night, my talk. We all have these winning strategies. And the first step is, or a important first step is recognizing that that's all they are. And they're just strategies of avoidance, strategies of aversion. So I think we're.
And I would just add that, of course, both are really useful, that, you know, that you don't throw out psychology and you don't throw out the Buddha's teachings, hopefully, that you need them both.
Lunch, Mom?
Enjoy lunch.